How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sun like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
It's impeachment ruling day for President Yoon Suk-yeol and South Korea. The Constitutional Court will rule on the validity of his martial law order to either unseat him or keep him as the country's leader. We head over to the court straight away. Joining us is our correspondent, Oh Soo-young. Hello there, Soo-young.
Hi, Dami.
So, Soo-young, aren't we less than an hour away from the ruling at 11 a.m.? Now, it seems pretty quiet over there, but I imagine the air is full of suspense.
That's right, Tammy. I'm at the Constitutional Court, where it's relatively quiet today compared to other days, but the atmosphere is thick with tension, as today there are extra police lines, vehicles and metal barriers keeping this place heavily fortified. At 11 a.m., the 8-member bench will enter the courtroom and take their seats, with Acting Chief Justice Woo Young-bae at the centre. He's going to declare the start of the ruling, which will end the months-long constitutional battle between the legislature and the executive. Following President Yoon's martial law declaration last December, the National Assembly passed an impeachment motion against him, accusing Yoon of declaring and conducting martial law illegally, deploying troops to seize parliament and state institutions, and attempting to arrest political and judicial figures. Meanwhile, President Yoon has stated that declaring martial law is an executive right of the president, and that his hand was forced by the majority-led National Assembly's legislative abuses, budget cuts and sabotage against the government. The ruling itself will be delivered by the Acting Chief Justice, and of course we don't know what the final judgment will be. However, the order in which he delivers the verdict may offer some early clues. Based on past cases, if the justice shares the reasoning for the verdict first, it usually means there's been a unanimous decision. In former President Park Geun-hye's case in 2017, where the court unanimously agreed on her impeachment, the reading of her ruling took around 25 minutes and the verdict came last. But if the final judgment is stated first, it suggests a split decision, with various justices sharing dissenting or concurring opinions. That's what happened in last month's ruling on Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment. Well, the style of ruling is actually at the court's discretion, so we'll have to see if the bench follows these past practices. Now, if 6 or more of the 8 justices uphold the impeachment motion, President Yoon will be removed from office. The verdict takes immediate legal effect, so the moment it's read out loud, it's effective, and this will come 111 days after the case began. President Yoon, now, he's not going to be attending the court session today, considering the logistical and security-related complications. So he's likely to be watching from his official residence, as it's all going to be broadcast live. Meanwhile, here at the court, 20 public gallery seats are open to the public, and an online lottery saw over 96,000 people register for a spot, meaning that the rate of competition was around 4,800 to 1.
Well, Soo-young, it's also taken a record number of days since his trial hearings wrapped up back in late February for the justices to reach a decision. Why is that?
Well, that is really a key question, Tammy, and given the high confidentiality of the case, there's no way of knowing what prolonged the process at this very point. But we, of course, can speculate. First, many legal experts say that the legal and constitutional questions surrounding President Yoon's martial law declaration was relatively straightforward, as the events were televised live. But what complicates the matter is whether President Yoon's potential violations were serious enough to justify his removal. Also, the case involved conflicting testimonies from key figures, including military officials, presidential aides, and others close to the events in question. There were major disputes over what kind of orders were issued, whether they were executed properly, and what President Yoon's true intentions were. So resolving these contradictions and weighing their significance is probably what led to the considerable amount of time that took to complete the deliberation. Another important factor that could have prolonged their decision is that the nation being deeply polarized, the court could have been refining the language used in the ruling, not only for legal precision, but to ensure that it can be broadly accepted by the public.
So the fate of the president and the nation hangs in the balance of the court's decision on his impeachment. Now, there are various scenarios. Soo-young, walk us through those scenarios.
Well, if the court decides collectively to uphold the impeachment, then President Yoon will be the second leader in South Korean history to be unseated, following President Park Geun-hye's impeachment in 2017. Now, effective immediately, Yoon would have to leave his office and residence in Yongsan-gu district, and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will continue as acting president until an early election is held within 60 days. On the flip side, if the impeachment is dismissed with prejudice, President Yoon would retain his status and immediately resume his duties. Even with his impeachment case closed for good, Yoon, however, would still face investigations regarding the December 3rd martial law declaration. But during the course of his presidency, he'd be immune from charges other than for treason and insurrection. A third scenario is the court dismissing the case without prejudice, or simply put, dropping the case for now due to legal or procedural issues. So then the president would return to office, but the National Assembly would in fact be able to reintroduce the impeachment motion in the future. Whatever the outcome might be today, it's going to bring an end to, well, hopefully an end to the months of uncertainty, and also hopefully amount to a constructive step forward for a mature Korean democracy.
Indeed. Thank you, Soo-young. We'll talk again, of course, when the ruling is out. The entire nation is getting worked up, especially around the court where the ruling is about to happen. And our Park Kwon-woo is out there on the streets. Kwon-woo, it's been half an hour since the last time I spoke to you. Are scenes any different on the streets now?
Yes, Tommy. So if we talk about any differences, I can say that the protest is getting even larger and the voices are getting way louder. So I have to even speak up loud as this much. And so the massive protests are taking place here in Anguk Station, the closest station near the Constitutional Court. And I've been standing here for additional minutes after we last connected. And the protesters, usually the ones in favor of President Yoon's impeachment, continue their passionate chanting with these songs, K-pop songs with no sign of stopping. Yoon's supporters, on the other hand, most of them have moved to Hannam-dong, where the presidential residence is located. So they are actually protesting at the site, and they are watching, waiting for the news impeachment ruling to take place. So they're waiting for the live broadcast. And the atmosphere here where I'm standing is truly intense with less than just 20 minutes to go until a decision is finally made. And the crowd is getting even louder, larger, and given that this is a historic moment. According to reports, thousands of people are gathering places, including this place in Anguk Station, Hwanghamun, and also near the presidential residence. And around 6,000 people have been gathered, according to police estimates here at Anguk Station. Many of the protesters have been protesting around the clock, stressing that this is their last protest to take place.
Tensions are being heated as the clock is ticking. Konu, security and safety remain absolute priorities, especially during this chaotic time. Security levels have been dialed up nationwide, right?
That's true as well. So the police have raised their alert level to Kapo, which is the highest level of alert that allows 100% mobilization of police forces and over 200 riot police units with more than 14,000 police personnel have been dispatched just in Seoul, along with special forces also on duty to prevent any terrorist or drone attacks taking place. A 150-meter radius around the Constitutional Court has been locked down with police vehicles designating the area as a vacuum zone with protesters prohibited from entering. Anguk Station, where I'm standing now, is currently closed, and several schools and tourist attractions also shut down temporarily. We're told that nearby businesses have either shut down or changed to operate remotely for the day, but I saw some places open in the morning as well. And these measures are reminiscent of those put in place 8 years ago when former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment was upheld by the court as 4 people died during clashes after the ruling was made.
Konu, thanks for the report, and please do stay safe there. And the presidential office is also patiently waiting for the ruling, as the future of the office is also hanging on the final verdict. We are connecting with our correspondent Kim Do-yeon at the office over in Yongsan. Hello there, Do-yeon.
Morning, Dami. As of now, there isn't anything official from the presidential office. Now, after a period of relative calm here for the first time in a few months, it's been bustling, especially where the media section is for the first time in a few months. Last we heard from the presidential office was on Tuesday when an official said at the top office that it's going to wait calmly for the results. That's something that was repeated from early on. We're expecting a message from President Yoon after the ruling, but the exact timing will depend on the result. As for the staff, they have been in full operation for the past few months to support the acting president, and even this morning there was a meeting among senior secretaries.
I can definitely feel that calmness and serenity at the office in Yongsan. Do-yeon, do remind us once again, what happens if the impeachment is upheld? What is the nation expecting then?
Dami, that's right. In less than an hour, we'll know if he's going to continue as the president or he will be removed from the office. Now, we heard from Soo-young, in case of the impeachment being upheld, as soon as the acting Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court announces it, Yoon will lose his job immediately. If he becomes, most importantly, Yoon then will become a civilian, lose all presidential treatments and benefits. Now, he's also going through a criminal trial for his alleged insurrection charges. If he becomes a civilian, it'll be much easier for the prosecutors to call Yoon up for further questioning, as he won't have an official security system operating. That wasn't the case up to now, as we saw a push and pull between the investigators for the criminal case and the Presidential Security Service. Also, he'll have to leave the residence in Hannam-dong where he currently is. There's no rule for how many days he can stay, but back in 2017, President Park Geun-hye left the former presidential Blue House 2 days after her impeachment was upheld. Yoon's home is in the Seochogu district of Seoul.
So scenario one is Constitutional Court upholding the impeachment. Then what happens if the president is not impeached? He will resume his role right away.
Right. In the case of the impeachment being rejected, as we just heard from Soo-young, he will resume his role right away. And once the big moments for the nation to watch will be his return to this presidential office from the presidential residence. When former President Roh Moo-hyun was reinstated, he was still at the presidential Blue House, so he was already at the office. But it'll be a big moment for the nation to watch for President Yoon to come back to work as soon as he is reinstated. We know he's got a number of tasks to take care of right now. There is the tariff issue with the U.S. that the South Korean government has been trying to negotiate, but the past two acting presidents were not able to contact U.S. President Donald Trump directly. Now, on top of that, he has when he is reinstated, he'll have the talks with Donald Trump is expected for the first thing. Now, in terms of domestic issues, we're looking at a very polarized nation, and Yoon's approval rating prior to his suspension was already low, according to weekly polls. A constitutional amendment, which Yoon's party says would be more in line with President-day values, is expected to be one of the tasks he's also going to address if he returns. He'll continue to face a majority opposition in the National Assembly, with a declaration of martial law resulting in a stronger standoff between the aisle.
A lot will be on the way, even if it's back in the office. All right, Toyan, do keep us posted throughout the day. Thank you. We now turn to the National Assembly, where tensions are brewing as the wait for the ruling has deepened political strife. Let's connect with our correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Ha-young, how are things looking there?
Tommy, with the impeachment ruling just around the corner, the atmosphere here at the National Assembly is tense in time. Convened a meeting just a few minutes ago where they plan to wait and watch the ruling. And after the verdict is delivered, the PPP lawmakers will gather at 11:30 a.m. to discuss the party's response and next steps. And ahead of the ruling, the PPP has been expecting the Constitutional Court to dismiss the impeachment and for President Yoon to return to office. And if Yoon is reinstated, the PPP plans to push for a constitutional amendment to fit present-day values, as Yoon said earlier that he would not cling to power but instead pursue constitutional reform. And interim PPP leader Kwon Young-se reaffirmed yesterday that the party will accept the court's ruling and urged the opposition to do the same. Take a listen.
The PPP and I will accept the Constitutional Court's impeachment ruling and prepare for what comes next. We strongly urge the Democratic Party to deeply reflect on its actions and accept the outcome.
So a pledge to accept the court's ruling from the ruling party. Now, Ha-young, do fill us in what the atmosphere is like within the opposition party.
Right, Tommy. Well, the leadership of the main opposition Democratic Party, which has been staging protests outside the parliament for the past few weeks demanding Yoon's impeachment, is also expected to watch the ruling live from here at the National Assembly today. And the DP lawmakers will also hold a meeting after the ruling at 1:30 p.m. And the party has been arguing that Yoon's removal is the only option, urging the court for unanimous decision to impeach Yoon. And DP floor leader Park Chan-dae said on Thursday there is enough evidence to prove Yoon's impeachment. Take a listen.
There is already overwhelming evidence to justify Yoon's removal. I have no doubt that the court will remove him from office for violating the Constitution.
While the National Assembly has tightened security, restricting outside personnel from entering the premises, both parties have ordered their lawmakers to stay on standby at the parliament this week. And that's all I have for this hour, and I'll bring more updates from both parties after the ruling. Back to you, Dami.
Sure, Ha-young, thank you for that coverage. That was our Shin Ha-young reporting live from the National Assembly. So we are now counting down to the ruling. It's 10:56 a.m. So we are now just a few minutes away from the ruling. Let us spend the next few minutes with legal experts. Joining me on the left is Professor Song Se-ryun. Welcome.
Happy to join you.
And also legal expert Kim Ji-soo on my right. Welcome.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. So, Professor Song, did you have any trouble getting here to the studio because of all the rallies across the country or Seoul?
Not much trouble, just because I took a precaution. I live not far from the Constitutional Court. So if I was staying there, probably I was hemmed in with the blockades and all those. So I removed myself early from that scene. So that made it easier to get here.
It was a good call.
Right.
Jisoo, any trouble for you this morning?
I also didn't have any troubles. And the fact that I lived nearby Kyode, which has a Seoul District Court and Supreme Court. But however, I believe that it feels like a calm before the storm to just fall in.
Well, Jisoo, we are just minutes away from the verdict, about 3 minutes. I'm sure you're a lot more familiar with the court scenes that are happening at the moment. What are you expecting to happen at this moment?
Well, now, due to strict security, we haven't seen any kind of knowledges and information of how and when the justices are doing or whatsoever. But given that their final deliberation began at 9:30, I believe that they will be already gathered and perhaps before 9 a.m. And today's meeting is not about to decide the outcome itself. That decision has already been made. So what they're doing now is reviewing the decision document, refining the languages itself, especially ensuring every word, every legal citations and reasoning of sentences to uphold public scrutiny. So this is a familiar process we have witnessed before in 2017 with President Park Geun-hye's ruling case. On the day of her, the justices also met in the morning to finalize the text. And at that time, the public division was extremely high. So the court understood that the word matters as much as its verdict. So I think we can expect the same process to upheld again.
Well, Professor Song, I want to spend the very last minute with you. What the core element will be to determine and judge the fate of a South Korean leader?
Well, the Constitutional Court will look at the constitutionality of his actions, not only the procedural requirements, whether there was enough there to trigger the martial law, but I think that the last half of the question, which might be more important in this case, is whether there was serious enough or grave enough to strip him off the office of presidency.
So we are now looking at the courtroom. It looks very quiet, Jisoo, right?
Yes, it looks very calm.
And that is always what happens in the courtroom right before the ruling, right?
Yes, that's right. And we have a special, a janitor approving whether the atmosphere to stay calm. So.
All right, the ruling is about to commence. We will come back right afterwards. Take a listen.
지금부터
We will now
2024
begin
헌납
2024 헌납 8,
윤석열 탄핵
the
사건에 대한
impeachment of
선고를
President Yoon Suk-yeol. We will begin the ruling. First of all, let us look at the requirements for the legality.
사법심사의 대상이 되는지에 관하여 보겠습니다.
We are first going to look at if the martial law would be falling under the illegality.
탄핵 심판의 취지를
This
고려하면
impeachment
이 사건
ruling
계엄 선포가 고도의
to look
정치적
at the
결단을
martial law
요하는
decree,
행위라 하더라도
even
그
if it
헌법
is
및 법률
an
위반 여부를
act of governance,
심사할 수 있습니다.
we can look
국회
at and
법사위
judge
조사
if
없이
there
이
is
사건
any
탄핵 소추안을
unconstitutionality in
의결한
this
점에 대하여
activity.
보겠습니다.
We will first look at
헌법은
the
국회의
resolution.
소추 절차를 입법에 맡기고 있고
The
국회법은
martial law
법사위 조사
should
여부를
go
국회의
under,
재량으로 규정하고 있습니다.
and it should be looked
따라서
under
법사위의
the law
조사가
and
없었다고 하여
even if it means that the legislative group of the National Assembly, even if it did not go through that action, it does not mean that it is illegal. And also the prohibition against double jeopardy, we're going to look into this aspect. And although it did not go to the vote because it does not abuse this double jeopardy, and there is Justice Jung Hyung-sik had a concurring opinion that it should go through this deliberation, and we are going to look at if it had any defect, and even if this was the martial law was cancelled, we cannot think that it was not legal, and let us look at the fact whether
적용 법조문을 철회, 변경하는 것은 소추 사유의 철회, 변경에 해당하지 않으므로 특별한 절차를 거치지 않더라도
the prosecution, even if it's not specified, it is permitted. And if there is no insurrection facts in the National Assembly's impeachment resolution, it is not, we cannot say that it is illegal. We're going to look at the abuse of power, and this martial law decree, we cannot see that it was an abuse of power. Then this, so the impeachment was legal. And there was concurring opinion by Justice Lee Mi-sun and Kim Hyung-do, and therefore in going forward there is a need for a more stringent application of the law, and that is the concurring opinion by Kim Bok-kyung. And if there was a illegality of the respondent, we are going to look at it. And first, about the martial law declaration. Looking at the Act, the Constitution, the martial law can be declared when in the wartime contingency. So if it is in the wartime, and if there is a grave difficulty for the government to govern, and the respondent had an unprecedented made an action because of the opposition parties, and it was his assertion because of the opposition parties' actions, and the opposition party had made 22 motions of impeachment so far, and and it rendered the concerns that such constitution had rendered the opposition party to make impeachments after impeachments. However, at that time, there were only 2 impeachment cases in the Constitutional Court, and 2025 budget plan was at the time of this martial law declaration did not have any impact, and there weren't any resolution by the National Assembly at that time, and therefore this cannot be substantiated as an act that had come to the conclusion of martial law declaration. And considering the many reconsiderations that the respondents could exercise, it cannot justify the martial law declaration. And also, the respondent urges that there was there was a suspicion that there were activities of subversion, and also but it does not mean that it is substantiated. And for the National Election Commission, because the National Election Commission had made actions to supplement their shortcomings, it does not mean that the respondents' claims are substantiated, and it could not be seen that such threats had been existing at the time of martial law declaration. And also, the military troops deployment. When we look at that, the respondent claims that the paralysis of the state affairs that he saw that was the situation, it is something that could be resolved through other means rather than military deployment. And the respondent said that the martial law decree was to appeal to the public. However, we do not see that it was the purpose. And therefore, and also the respondent's activities did not stop there, but he went further to deploy the military troops to the National Assembly. Therefore, his claims that it was for the appeal to the public is not accepted. If so, it had a substantial breach of the Constitution. We go on to the next point. The declaration of martial law and the commander-in-chief should be named after going through the cabinet meeting. And before the declaration, it had to be put into motion for the cabinet meeting. We do acknowledge that it went through a brief explanation to the cabinet meeting. However, it didn't have sufficient enough time for the cabinet members to have a deliberation process. And the respondent
부서하지 않았음에도 이 사건 계엄을
even if
선포하였고
the cabinet
그 시행 일시,
members
시행
did not
지역
have a signature on
및
the
계엄
resolution,
공고하지 않았으며 지체 없이 국회에
he
통고하지도
did not
않았으므로
hesitate to go and declare, and also did not notify the National Assembly, so it violated the procedural process. And the second, the deployment of troops to the National Assembly. The respondent ordered the Defense Minister to deploy the military troops to the National Assembly, and some of the troops had broken into the building of the National Assembly, and he said he ordered the commander to take out all the people because of the quorum had not been reached, and also to the police chief, he notified the proclamation and had 6 times of phone calls with him, and therefore the police commander had the chief of the police had blocked the National Assembly building, and thus had the other legislators had to go over the wall to go into the National Assembly building. And also, he ordered to locate 14 people and called the Deputy Director of the National Intelligence Service to locate these people and requested to do that. And therefore, the respondent, as we see here, had deployed police and military to block the National Assembly and interrupt the National Assembly's activities to resolve, and therefore had infringed upon the immunity of National Assembly members, and also involved in the activities of the legislators. And the respondent had deployed the troops for a political motive, and therefore he did not uphold his duties, and not only that, but made the military to go against the people who they have to protect, and therefore it is illegal. And about the proclamation of the martial law, through this proclamation, he ordered that prohibition of any political activities of the lawmakers and the local lawmakers, and it is against the law. And this is a breach of the basic freedom of the people of Korea. And about the seizure and search of the National Election Commission, he ordered the seizure and search, and therefore the troops had broken into the National Election Commission, and this was a warrantless seizure against the NEC, and it is infringing the independence of the National Election Commission. And fifth, as mentioned earlier, the respondent, locating the people, the figures include the former justice and former judges, and this means that it is a pressure against the justices, and therefore an infringement of the
관하여 보겠습니다.
Of judicial power. Now we will look at if this is at the level of to justify removal from office. The respondent declared martial law and deployed troops and denied the democracy of the country and made orders to seizure and search the National Election Commission and had made overreaching violation to the basic rights of the people, and it had a grave infringement on the security of the people. And the National Assembly could resolve against this martial law thanks to the National Assembly members and the civilians' activities. So the reason that it was cancelled was not due to the respondent's will, but otherwise. And the respondent had used his power out of his limits. After the respondent had taken office, the opposition party had the majority of power and therefore had made a lot of impeachment activities. And also about the budget, it was passed only in a unilateral movement by the opposition party. And also the opposition party unilaterally passed the motions that the government was against, and this was repetitive. And therefore, the respondent, because of such activities by the opposition party, it seems that the respondent had this urge to stop this tyranny of the opposition party. And it should be respected that he had this opinion and decision. However, this activity of the opposition bloc is an action and is a problem of political aspect, and this is in. And it should, and any activities against it should be in the boundary that could be harmonized with the law and constitution. And also based on. And we believe that the opposition party should have exercised tolerance and the stance of dialogue, and also the respondent should have done the same. However, the action of the respondent is difficult to see that it was in the boundary that could be harmonized with law and constitution. And he should have taken the steps to make it harmonized with the law and constitution. And the respondent had the opportunity to talk to the people and to persuade the people. And he should not have made attempts to exclude the opposition bloc. And the respondent had declared the martial law declaration, went on to declare the martial law, and had created significant confusion and conflict of the society and of the people. He deployed the military to obstruct the National Assembly and constitutional order, and had went against his responsibility to uphold the Constitution, and thus the unconstitutionality of the respondent is not something that could be tolerated by the Constitution, and the adverse impact of the respondents is very grave, and the constitutionality, the benefit of the constitutionality is much higher to impeach the respondent, and therefore we would like to have the court hereby renders the following judgment by unanimous decision of all decisions. 11:22 a.m. Order: the respondent, President Yoon Suk-yeol, is hereby removed from office.
마치겠습니다.
So that was the ruling. It is official. The Constitutional Court of Korea has upheld the impeachment of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. So how did you read the ruling, Professor Song?
Well, in a way, there's no surprise. It was pretty clear from the start that there were violations of constitutional, procedural, and substantive elements. And the question was whether that was grave enough and serious enough. And I see that 8-0 decision is a very clear message. And this is actually from coming from even the President Park Geun-hye's case. This Constitutional Court imposes a very high standard to safeguard and uphold Constitution to the President. And President can say all day, and it was just 2-hour episodes to send the message. But when you have a democratic institutions all usurped like that, even though nobody died, even though it was short, from the eyes of the law, of the Constitution, this kind of actions cannot be condoned just because it was short or not deadly. I think it is a decision that will go down the history, and I think it will be a credit to the Constitutional Court to impose this kind of grave and very serious responsibility to the President second time. So I wasn't sure whether there would be some discussion about the procedural technicalities and all those. No. 8-0 is a very clear message.
It took 22 minutes to make a president no longer a Mr. President, right? Now, Ji-soo, we have to go through the 5 focal points that were based on Yoon's dismissal. First, let's start with the legality of declaring a state of emergency.
Well, the Constitution has set a very strict conditions regarding declaring martial law. It should be the equivalent of a wartime situation. And you definitely mentioned that since it wasn't a wartime situation, a rebellion, or a comparable national emergency that requires such kind of martial law. So the Constitutional Court has declared that the martial law declaration itself was illegal and unconstitutional. And they also mentioned about the procedural part as well. So there was no proper cabinet meetings, no clear documentations, and also under Article 77 of the constitutional law, it requires a president to notify the National Assembly after the declaring martial law. However, there was no such kind of notifications in this case. And I believe that this was backed up by the testimony from Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, testified during the 10th hearing on February 20th, saying the cabinet meeting prior to the declaration was not a standard one. There were both formality issues and substantive amount of defects. So I believe that testimony have definitely influences the ruling.
Well, Professor Song, was there then the legality of, attempt to disrupt activities at the National Assembly on the night of the December martial law order? What did the justice have to say?
Well, the declaration they clearly stated that all political activities should stop. And the evidence showed that the military was deployed to bring those lawmakers out of the National Assembly. I think that was clear enough to the justices that because we have set up this check and balance system in the separation of government, and that kind of messages just goes so patently against the system that we have. So again, whether that was carried out, whether that was forceful enough, or whether there was not enough number of military members put in, it doesn't matter, because that declaration and the following actions just corroborated that aspect of it.
Right, and then also the justice made sure to point out how the soldiers who are sacrificing themselves for the nation had to be in a standoff with civilians, right, citizens of South Korea. That also was raised as an issue. Right. The military has a specific role in this country, and it's not to accomplish any kind of political aims of the president. That's why it's an insurrection. I think that there is a clear message from the Constitutional Court that might affect the insurrection trial, that his actions were so unusual and so out of the norms and the edicts of the law and the Constitution. And of course, the justices were also all on the same page on the unconstitutionality of the emergency decree, Jisoo, right?
That's right. The Constitutional Court focused it on Article 1 of the decree, which banned all political activities, including those of the National Assembly and political parties. And they mentioned clearly that it breached our basic right as to participate in politics. And while the Constitution guarantees the right of the National Assembly to request the lifting of the martial law, it seems that there is to be no provisions to allow an emergency decree to ban and eradicate all those kind of provisions. So therefore, the Constitutional Court has acknowledged that banning parliamentary activity was a definite and a clear unconstitutional act, and it was definitely illegal.
So it was definitely unconstitutional whatsoever to declare a state of emergency or even the martial law order.
Yes, it's correct. The national parliamentaries' participation always should be secured no matter what happens.
Exactly. Well, Professor Song, I like to go back to what we just discussed, arresting politicians at the National Assembly. That is also not justified at all in any sense, right?
Right. It's corroborating evidence. First, we have the declaration that says all political activities stop. And then there were evidences of lists composed of specific politicians to be rounded up. And although there were some back and forth about the testimonies, but I think there were enough number of testimonies to make that a very important part of the decision. Because if you disrupt those lawmakers, you're disrupting the National Assembly, and the National Assembly stands in the system as the key check and balance system. So that kind of calculation just checks out.
Well, the justice also made sure to stress the standoff between the president and the National Assembly lawmakers. Now, to resolve any kind of difficulties or troubles between them have to be based on the idea of democracy, right?
Right. I think this is the key aspect of what we experienced. I mean, you have to resolve the political questions in a political arena, in the National Assembly. Putting that into a military or even to the judiciary when the question itself is essentially a political question, that can result in this kind of result. The judiciary sometimes exercises judicial restraint when it comes to the political questions. I think the president was hoping that the justice will say, well, this is a political issue, we're judiciary, so we'll just at the hands off. But no, another aspect of the constitutional system is that when there is a conflict, judiciary steps in, and they did step in a very clear manner. I think that that kind of system is actually core part of our democratic institutions, how to resolve the conflicts. But even when we get to that, I think the big lesson I hope we learned is that politicians should talk to each other, and rather than just going to the court looking for win or lose, they have to compromise. They have to find a solution when there are conflicts. And if you don't do that, the whole country suffers.
Well, drama between the president and the National Assembly and lawmakers is nothing new under any administration, I have to say. But the thing is, based on this ruling today, Jisoo, there were so many figures involved in this one case, right? Defense minister, just to name a few.
Yes, there are a lot of co-culprits, I would say. So they're now facing consequences, I believe, after this rulings.
What kind of consequences are you expecting then?
Well, there could be a lot of criminal allegations that have been stopped due to presidential immunity. But however, since President Yoon has been eradicated from his office now, he no longer has the privilege to relish those kind of immunities. So that means there will be a start of investigations and also indictments that have been prolonged due to this ruling of impeachment, I guess.
So the list of figures that the justice mentioned today, they will all be under separate rulings, right?
Yeah, separate rulings as a criminal procedures, I have to say.
Okay, and also for President Yoon himself.
Definitely, also him too.
Well, Professor Song, I'd like to point out how the Constitutional Court did acknowledge the heavy responsibility that Yoon had to go through as the South Korean leader. Now, do you think that's a relief to Yoon, although he is no longer the president?
Well, I can look at it, we can all look at it in several ways. One is because the office of presidency, and we talked about the imperial nature of the presidency, I think there are things to be fixed, right? But I think that even with some kind of deficiencies, president is supposed to uphold the Constitution. That responsibility is very, very heavy. And if you were to become a president, you should know that. And in the course of executing his duties, discharging his duties, he should have learned it by now. And again, even from President Park Geun-hye's case, it was pretty clear from the highest court that the Constitution is nothing to be sniffed about, nothing to be used as some kind of tools. If you don't treat it with the respect and care, the result could be that you are out of your job.
Especially when you have so much burden on your shoulders as the leader who leads the country, right?
Right.
Jisoo, I'd like to point out how the court also said that the lawmakers were not notified at all, during this, on the night of the December martial law order. Tell us more about that.
Regarding the notifications to the parliament itself, the Yoons just keep stating that it was out of the nowhere, out of the thin air, because the situation was a very emergent and serious. However, that's why the Constitution law exists. No matter how severe the intensity of the situation is, we need to abide by the law, because that's what democratic country does. So President Yoon has simply just ignored all kind of procedurals, and he just insisted that his justification of publicly safety orders and those kind of stuffs can definitely justify his intentions. However, the Constitutional Court has not gone with the same way as he does.
Professor Song, he is no longer Mr. President, right? I remember back in 8 years ago when former President Park Geun-hye was impeached, she had to vacate her residency. Now, do you think former President Yoon is now, ready to leave and all packed? What do you think? What is on his mind now at the moment?
I'm sure they will give him a reasonable time, but he has to go back to his private residency in Seocheodong, I believe. And from there, he has to face continuing legal battles of insurrection criminal charges. He's no longer president, so his privileges are all stripped off except for the security measures. He will still be guarded, but he will not be given 3 secretaries or chauffeur that is given to former presidents. So it is a new life for him. I'm not sure what he will do, but I think for us, the Korean citizens, what is more urgent and important is how we manage the snap election that will happen in 2 months.
Right. Well, going back to what you just mentioned, he will be under presidential security to a certain degree. Now, how long will that last?
Well, you remember the President Chun Doo-hwan, he had the security guards outside. We do protect the physical integrity of the president, no matter how they went out. But pensions, no. Secretaries, no. All kinds of privileges he could have had. It's all gone at this point.
Well, Jisoo, I said former President Park Geun-hye took 2 days to empty out of the presidential residence. How many days do you expect from Yoon?
Well, I believe it will be the same as President Park Geun-hye's case also, because he already may have known that this outcome will be coming. And he has his own home at Seocho-dong, so he may be evacuated from his presidential office to his private residency as soon as possible, I believe.
Jisoo, what do you think is on his mind at this moment, now that the ruling is out?
Well, I still think that he's going to see as the Constitutional Court to be a little bit unfair, because there have been some kind of procedural flaws on the side of Yoon's cases and from his lawyers, after all. But I believe that in this kind of situation, he was the president of Korea. Now he has to show as a president of himself, he have to show that we need to abide by the law and we have to accept the Constitutional Court's ruling no matter how it defies his own interests. And I think that will be the most dignified way for him to leave his office for now.
As the former president of the Republic of South Korea. Professor Song, not a single word from Yoon yet as of 11:39 a.m. on this Friday. When do you think he will issue a statement or even a message? When and how?
Well, he should do that as soon as possible, but I hope that the message is that he will respect the decision and he will thank the citizens, the people of Korea. And at this point, making any kind of excuses probably would not be good. I hope the message is not in any way to instigate his supporters. I think that this whole experience for Korea was how we treat our institutions. And not only the Constitutional Court, but the institutions of democracy, the presidency, the lawmakers. I mean, I have to mention that a lot of actions that the lawmakers and the opposition parties did, there's nothing to praise about. There were a lot of things that they didn't do right. But in the end, 2 wrongs did not make right. So I think that we have to fix our institutions in terms of the office of presidency, but at the same time, the institutions of how we work with the National Assembly lawmakers. And because of that, I hope that one of the messages, hopefully, is about his endorsement of the constitutional amendment, even though he cannot really lead it at this point. I think that the Korea is going into a crucial period of recovery and the healing from all these disruptions. But knowing Korean people, I think we have to find the way to fix some of the things that came out and become a better democracy, having better institutions going forward.
That is why maybe he needs to speak up as soon as possible so that we can wrap things up and move on, right?
Yes.
Well, Jisoo, then, what kind of method do you think he will use to issue his, words? Video recorded, live? What do you think?
Well, he has shown it a lot of formats of messages before. He has used it on Facebook posts, handwritten letters, and video calls, and even he sent some of his people to the parliament itself to defend his voice. But I believe, considering the stake and the seriousness of this case, I believe he have to, and he should be showing on a video call to his supporters or to the people he has affected during this case.
Well, Professor Song, it is what it is. It's over. As we all know, the impeachment ruling conducted by the Constitutional Court is a single trial. Now, there's no going back, right?
Right. There's no appeal. That's the scheme that we have in a Constitutional Court. That's why they spent a lot of time talking amongst themselves in terms of what kind of decisions they have to make. And I'm again, very surprised that it was 8-0 because there were a lot of talks about the divisions inside. But I think that listening to the rationales, how they got to the decision, it seems like they were pretty straightforward in terms of interpreting the Constitution and applying it. I think their role is over. I think that we talked about what president should do, a former president should do. But as citizens, over this issue, we were pretty well divided. And I think how we take the decision and how we respect the processes that we went through, I think it would be very, very important. I know a lot of people are out there on the streets. It'll take some time to kind of process it, but they have to process it in a way that it shows the strength of democracy in Korea.
Right. We do need some time to, take it all in and let it all out so that we do have a smooth future, right?
Right.
Well, Jisoo, Professor Song mentioned how the composition turned out to be 8-0, right? Did that shock you in any way?
Well, I definitely was, it will be a very shocking news for a lot of majority people out there, but I believe we could have seen the result because the same thing happened back in 2017 before the prior president, Park Geun-hye's case also. She also had a 8 bench at that time, and all 8 justices have made a unanimous vote. And there are a lot of public speculations that the vote's going to be split. However, it turned out to be a unanimous ruling, and it also samely applies to this same case also.
Do you think that's why it took so long for the justices to, assign a ruling date and make their judgment?
Yes, this was the longest ruling date ever. It took over 38 days from the final argument. So I believe that the justices have made a very precautious, and they were taking a lot of time to withstand public scrutiny when the ruling came out, because we already have seen how public disputes and anger is out there. So the justices have to have a time to process it in the document in itself. And I think they did a pretty well job in there.
The nation is more polarized than ever. Now, it is up to us, South Korean people, to accept the ruling. Like I mentioned, it's time to move on. But the security and safety issues over the 8 justices who made the call are still, lingering. Will they be under tight protection?
Well, they will be. And I want to say that there was a precautionary measure, but it is not. It may not be because, we had experience of, crowds storming the Western District courthouse.
Right.
And even during the former President Park Geun-hye's case, there were protesters, casualties there. So there was some concern about the violence among this issue, especially this time. It's so contentious. So I hope nothing like that happens. I think that'll be a very big testament of how the Korean people takes this kind of political drama. And even though they don't like the decisions, a lot of them, but they have to show their fortitude and they keep their cool at this point. But even that, I think that the justices should be protected as a precautionary, and also any possibility of violence. And I hope that does not become one of the legacies after this decision.
Indeed. Well, the Constitutional Court of Korea has upheld the impeachment of now former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Let's go back to the Constitutional Court now, where our correspondent Oh Soo-young is standing by. Hello there, Soo-young.
Hi again, Tammy.
So, Soo-young, you've been covering this case for the past 111 days, and now we've officially reached the conclusion after the longest period of deliberation on the courts ever held for a presidential impeachment. Let's quickly go over what's unfolded until today and the final judgment.
You're exactly right, Tabby. It has been a very long time coming, and at 11:22 a.m. today on Friday, we heard the eight-member court, the eight-member judicial bench. They unanimously decided that President Yoon is to be removed and now has been effectively removed from his presidency. This decision was unanimous, and not one of them dissented, as some speculated. Now, the reasons that they gave were that President Yoon's martial law declaration severely violated the Constitution, disrupted the principles of a democratic country, and severely broke public trust. The full eight-member bench agreed to uphold the National Assembly's motion last year to impeach Yoon following his martial law declaration on December 3rd. The landmark decision on Friday now ends more than 3 months of nationwide uncertainty following the National Assembly's motion to impeach him. The Assembly accused him of declaring martial law illegally and improperly, deploying troops to seize Parliament and state institutions, and ordering arrests of political and judicial figures. Meanwhile, the prosecutor-turned-president attended his trials to defend himself, denying that he'd done the above-stated things. He argued that declaring martial law was his executive right, and that his hand was forced by the majority-led National Assembly's legislative abuses, budget cuts, and sabotage against the government. He also cited national security concerns such as Chinese spies and electoral fraud in the 2024 general election that saw a sweeping opposition victory. After scrutinising the arguments made over 11 trial hearings, 16 witness testimonies, over a record 38 days of deliberations, 3 times longer than in past presidential impeachments, the court collectively decided Yoon's actions gravely violated the constitutional order and the integrity of his office, warranting his removal from power.
Soo-young, that is the final verdict, 8-0 unanimous call. Now let's talk about how that final decision came together.
Right, so we saw this final decision was agreed upon by all 8 members of the judicial bench, and they all agreed that President Yoon had indeed declared martial law illegally, skipping required cabinet procedures and bringing great disturbance to the nation by undermining the country's democratic institutions and constitutional order. They cited his deployment of troops and police to the National Assembly and the National Election Commission as unlawful and an abuse of public servants. They said Yoon had violated the judiciary's independence as well, with the attempted arrests made of the Supreme Court Justice Chief. And the justices rejected all of Yoon's arguments for declaring martial law, deeming them unacceptable. The bench concluded that there had not been an actual state of emergency, as Yoon had claimed. While accepting, though, that there had been some friction with the National Assembly, President Yoon had his constitutionally given right to exercise vetoes on contentious bills, and the leaders should have made stronger attempts to engage in dialogue and negotiations with Parliament. The court also rejected suspicions of election fraud, along with any other objections to the proceedings of the impeachment case itself. Now, the fact that the bench was in full agreement of the grounds for Yoon's impeachment is fascinating. As justices had taken a record-long period of deliberation, there had been speculation that there could be some dissenting views by conservative justices, but today we saw a strong consensus emerge instead. Given the highly divisive political climate across the nation, it seems that the justices tried to ensure that they were united in their ruling and took their time to make the reasoning watertight to leave no room for criticism or dispute. So all in all, the ruling is out there as the final constitutional decision.
Seong, I have to point out, Yoon is the nation's second president in history to be removed from office following Park Geun-hye's impeachment 8 years ago. What's next for former President Yoon and the country, South Korea?
Right. Right now we are without a sitting president because effective immediately, President Yoon is stripped of his presidential status, and while he has to leave his official residence as well as the presidential office, of course. And as for the country's governance, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, as acting president, would continue to lead this caretaker government until an early election takes place within 60 days. The new administration will hit the ground running without a transition period. Now, as the impeached leader is back to civilian life with no post-presidential privileges, he's going to retreat back to his private residence, but he's only going to have basic personal protection. However, that's not going to be the last we hear of him. The former president still faces ongoing criminal investigations over his martial law declaration, with an initial ruling expected in August. So the constitutional case today may be closed, but more days of judgment lie ahead for the impeached leader. Today's ruling will undoubtedly, though, stir strong reactions across the whole political spectrum. So in a period of deep division, what ultimately sustains a democracy is believed to be fairness, accountability and respect for the law, and faith in due process as well. That gives power its legitimacy, and it's indeed a day of reckoning, but there's also hope that this will mark a constructive step forward as South Korea continues to test and strengthen the foundations of a resilient and mature democracy.
All right, Seong, thank you so much. That was our Oh Seong live from the court, which ousted President Yoon from power less than an hour ago. Now, let's go. We just finished connecting with our Oh Seong at the Constitutional Court. And as the nation now begins to digest the decision, tension has increased out on the streets. And our Park Geun-hye is out there. Geun-hye, it looks like it's a lot more chaotic now than before the ruling.
That's true, Dami. As soon as the court's decision was decided and announced, protesters here near Anguk Station, mostly in favor of President Yoon's impeachment, cheered loudly, celebrating the outcome. Many expressed feelings of joy and relief, calling out manse or hooray as their demand for Yoon's impeachment was finally fulfilled. People have been jumping, singing loudly and joyfully and hugging each other, deeply celebrating the Constitutional Court's decision. The cheers continued throughout the session as people watched the live broadcast of the ruling all together outside. And there was an overwhelming sense of relief as the verdict was read out. However, Yoon's supporters, who have largely relocated to Hwannam-dong near the presidential residence, voiced their outrage and expressed deep frustration and anger, and even cried very loudly. Protests there have grown increasingly fierce, showing the depth of their frustration with the rulings and the decision.
Well, Geun-hye, security and safety remain absolute priorities, especially during this unprecedented time. Now, security levels will remain at the highest level throughout the entire day, correct?
That's also true, Tommy. As mentioned, the police, as they raise their alert level to the highest, which is Kappo, the 100% mobilization of forces will be continuing as for now. And over 200 police riot units with more than 14,000 personnel have been dispatched just in Seoul, along with special forces also on duty to prevent any terrorist or drone attacks. A 150-meter radius around the Constitutional Court has been locked down with police vehicles, designating the area as a vacuum zone, with protesters prohibited from entering. And Anguk Station, the nearest subway station where I'm standing now, is currently closed, and several schools and tourist attractions like traditional palaces have shut down temporarily. We were told that nearby businesses were to be shut down, but I saw some places even open in the early morning. And these measures are reminiscent of those put in place 8 years ago as former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment was upheld by the courts, as 4 people died during clashes after the ruling was made at the time.
All right, Kanu, thank you for reporting from the ground. You do stay safe there. Now, let's connect to our correspondent, Kim Do-yeon, to see how the presidential office in Yongsan is responding to the news. Do-yeon, are there any words from the office or the president himself yet?
Dami, as of now, there are no words from the presidential office. In fact, with the impeachment being upheld, it's not even clear if we will hear from President Yoon himself. However, the official presidential flag, the phoenix symbol flag, has been taken down from the top of this building. This comes as prior to this ruling, there have been a bit of sense of hope from some of the staff that I have spoken to that maybe 3 justices could side with the president, but no, it was a unanimous decision. As for the staff here, they're expected to support acting President Han Duck-soo as he will be in charge of the government until the next presidential election, which will come within the next 60 days. A few moments ago, actually, we did hear the acting president addressing the nation briefly at the government complex. He said he takes the unfortunate situation of a sitting head of state being impeached for the 2nd time in our constitutional history very seriously. As the acting president, he will ensure that there is no vacuum in national security or diplomacy, and he will maintain a firm security posture. He will also assure to do his utmost to respond without delay to pressing issues such as the ongoing trade war, to prevent any public anxiety by upholding law and order, and to thoroughly prepare for all types of disasters. He also called on nation's politicians to work together.
So, Prime Minister, Acting President Han Duck-soo did react to the news right away, but still no word from former President Yoon or the presidential office in Yongsan. Now, Do-yeon, walk us through what lies ahead for former President Yoon Suk-yeol.
Right. President Yoon Suk-yeol has officially become former impeached President Yoon. He's now lost his presidential treatment and benefits. Most importantly, he's also going through a criminal trial for his alleged insurrection charges. As he became a civilian, it'll be much easier for the prosecutors to call Yoon up for further questioning, as he won't be having official security system operating. Up until now, that wasn't the case. We saw a push and pull between the investigators for the criminal case and the Presidential Security Service. Keep in mind, in South Korea's legal system, if Yoon is convicted of leading an insurrection, he could face life in jail or the death penalty. Also, he'll have to leave the residence in Hannam-dong where he currently is. There's no rule for how many days he can stay longer, but back in 2017, when President Park Geun-hye was impeached, she left the former presidential residence Blue House 2 days after her impeachment ruling. Yoon's personal home is in Seocho-go district of Seoul.
Right, Do-yeon, thank you for that coverage. We now go back to the National Assembly over in Yeouido to get the latest reactions from the rival parties. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young is at the parliament. Ha-young, why don't we start with the ruling party?
Sure, Tommy. Well, the ruling People Power Party said that they take the Constitutional Court's decision seriously and humbly accept it. And they added that while people may have different opinions and views, the court's ruling is final, and respecting it is the only way to uphold democracy and the rule of law. It said that as the ruling party, it regrets not having fulfilled its responsibilities. And PPP lawmakers have been gathered at a general meeting since 11:30 a.m. to discuss the matter further. And attention is now on how the PPP, which had a party consensus against the Yoon's impeachment, will respond to this outcome, as it could deal a major blow with the presidential election needing to take place within 60 days. And the biggest challenge for the party will be overcoming public opposition to a martial law declaration and the burden of 2 impeached presidents while winning over centrist and independent voters.
So that is a reaction from the ruling party. Then Hayoung, fill us in how the opposition party is reacting to the news.
Well, Tommy, the main opposition Democratic Party, which was at the forefront of the opposition-led push in the parliament to remove Yoon from office, welcomed the ruling, calling it the victory of South Korea. The party sent deepest respect to the Constitutional Court justices who unanimously decided to remove Yoon from office. And just a few minutes ago, DP leader Lee Jae-myung said that he wants to thank the people of South Korea for defending country's democracy. And he said that this is a tragic chapter in our constitutional history, one that must never be repeated. And he also added that it's a moment for everyone in politics to reflect and take full responsibility, adding that the party will do everything it can to prevent any further damage to the constitutional order. And the party, which has been eager to reclaim power since its defeat 3 years ago, is expected to prepare for the early presidential election. And all eyes are now on when DP chairman Lee Jae-myung, the party's front-runner, will step down as leader and launch his presidential bid. And meanwhile, the Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik will address the public at 2 p.m., so I'll bring more updates on this matter as well in our later newscast. Tommy?
Hayoung, we are collecting reactions from the National Assembly. Do keep us posted throughout the day. Thank you, Hayoung, for the report.
존경하는 국민 여러분,
Honorable people of Korea,
오늘
today the
헌법재판소가
Constitutional Court
대통령
had
탄핵
made
심판의
its
결과를
impeachment ruling
확정하였습니다.
against the president.
헌정사상
It is
두
with
번째로
heavy heart that
현직
the tragic
국가원수의
incident
탄핵이라는
of a second
불행한
impeachment of the
상황이
sitting
발생한
president
것을
since the constitutional
무겁게
history
생각합니다.
had come to reality.
저는 대통령
As
권한
the
대행으로서
acting president,
국가 안보
I will
외교에
make sure that there are no vacuum in the national security and diplomacy and maintain strong security posture.
또한 통상 전쟁
Also,
등
I will make sure that we do our utmost to have no setback in addressing the pressing issues such as trade war, and will establish the public order and thoroughly prepare against any disasters so that no one is nervous or at unrest. Additionally, the sovereign people and with your will, according to the Constitution and law, we will do our utmost in terms of the election management for the next president so that the next administration can come to life. And I would like to also reassure all the public officials, and I would like to ask the public officials that we have a grave mission to manage this state affairs stably, and we have grave situation externally and internally, and therefore I would like to ask you to take your responsibilities in carrying out your normal daily tasks. We are going to recover from this crisis, and I would like to ask all the people to live your daily lives without any hindrance. And also the political circle and the National Assembly, I would like to ask you to muster your strength and wisdom so that we can go further into the future for the Republic of Korea. And the government will do our utmost so that everything is stabilized. Thank you.
현직 대통령이
The sitting president is the second time that impeachment of a sitting president is something that should never happen again. It should never be repeated. It is a tragic incident, and including myself, the political circle will have to take responsibility and will have to reflect upon ourselves. The tragic incident should never be repeated, and we're going to do our utmost so that we can be the hope of the people. And throughout the history of the world, with the unarmed people's power suppressing the dictatorship and the power of the president. It is the only incident, and we have dramatically resurrected democracy on this land of this country. And I believe that the world will look at our history and will assess in a positive way of this K-democracy. And by doing so, we can turn this crisis into opportunity. From now on, it is the real Republic of Korea that takes its step forth. Together with the people, under the integrity and the unification, we are going to recover the democracy of the Republic of Korea. Together with all the people, we will be living in a stable, democratic country, and we are going to open up a new era that we know that this could be sustained. Thank you. Honorable fellow Koreans, it is with pity that we respect the Constitutional Court's decision. And although we take different angles, but the decision is the ultimate decision of the Constitutional Court, and us respecting such decision is the way to uphold the constitutional order. The society, for it to move forward, I believe that this is a path to move forward to a mature democracy. We would first and foremost would like to apologize to the people of Korea, and we take grave responsibility as the ruling political party. And the repetitive tyranny of the opposition party, we could not appropriately prevent it, and we believe, and we would like to apologize for such shortcomings. And we have the responsibility, and we know the criticism of the people, and we are going to digest it, and we are going to look into it. Honorable people of Korea, we are facing a big crisis once again. In any case, there should not be a violence that should be tolerated. It should be in the line with peaceful and peaceful deeds. And during this peaceful time, we have to go forward to a Republic of Korea of tomorrow. And this would be the only way for our country to recover. And it is the most important that the people and the government will be stably managed and governed. And for this, we are going to exercise all the rights that are empowered to us. And amongst this crisis, we, the People Power Party, will do our utmost so that we could take the responsibility and the people could trust us. Thank you.
So we just heard the reactions from both the rival parties, who said that they will accept the ruling on Yoon's dismissal. Plus, Prime Minister and Acting President Han Duck-soo addressed the nation for a smooth transition into the new administration. Now that former President Yoon has lost his power, an election to replace him will be held within 60 days. Our Peunji lays out an agenda for a snap presidential election.
Now that the Constitutional Court has ruled against President Yoon Suk-yeol, he has been removed from office immediately, meaning a formal end to his presidency. An early presidential election will have to be held within 2 months so that a new president can take office. South Korea's constitution specifically says a successor must be elected within 60 days in case the president is disqualified by a court ruling. And the nation's Public Official Election Act says the day of the election must be publicly announced by the president or acting president by not later than 50 days before the election day. This means since the court ruled against Yoon on April 4th, acting President Han Duck-soo must announce an election day before April 14th. The National Election Commission has already said that if a snap election were to take place, it would be sometime between May 24th and June 3rd. But it's widely believed that the election will be held on June 3rd, exactly 60 days after the ruling, to give parties as much time as possible to prepare for elections and leave some time for campaigning. Another reason is that June 3rd is a Tuesday. Mondays and Fridays are usually not seen as viable options for an election day due to fear of low voter turnouts, as voters are less likely to head to polls right before or after weekends. And this is not the first time South Korea is holding a snap election. 8 years ago, an early presidential election was held after former President Park Geun-hye was removed from office over a corruption scandal. The court ruled against Park on March 10, 2017, and most parties registered their candidates to run for the presidential election from March 31st to April 4th. Then the election was held on May 9th, exactly 60 days after the Constitutional Court's ruling. So just as was the case in 2017, the country is likely to set aside a full 2 months to prepare for an election to choose its next president.
In accordance with the unanimous decision of all justices, I hereby pronounce the court's order. As this is an impeachment case, the time of the pronouncement shall be recorded. The current time is 11:22 a.m. The respondent, President Yoon Suk-yeol, is ordered to be removed from office.
So the landmark ruling has now wrapped up, but this may be just a beginning for South Korea and South Korean politics. Plus, an early presidential election is now on the calendar. Let's connect with Professor Mason Ricci for more. Good morning, Professor Ricci.
Hi, good afternoon.
Professor Ricci, good afternoon. We are still waiting for former President Yoon Suk-yeol to speak up. What is he waiting for?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. Of course, my guess is that he's trying to collect his thoughts. He's probably in consultation with those people around him in his inner circle, with people from his party, perhaps with wife and family. We do know that he's known for being quite stubborn. He's used to getting his way. My guess is he might be having some difficulty, coming up with what it is that he wants to say and how it is that he wants to say it.
Well, I have to ask, will his party, the People Power Party, say goodbye to you now? Will his party abandon him? Will they be separated? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. He did have a core set of supporters in his party who really pulled out all the stops to try to protect him in the court of public opinion, with voters in Korea, with the political class here, legally speaking, and of course even internationally speaking. Those people will probably continue to feel aggrieved, and they probably won't let him go. But I think the broader party, and even some of his core supporters, of course, are quickly going to turn the page and start looking towards the election, which has to happen within 60 days. Politics doesn't have a very long memory in this regard, and so they're going to start looking to the future because that's where their interest lies.
Well, what is done is done. I have to stress, I can't stress enough, but how can the South Korean people realize and now fully practice the idea of a democracy? I mean, I'm asking if South Korea have the resilience to move forward.
Yeah, so if you're talking about the people, I think I would say, to some degree they've done that. They've protested on both sides, for and against impeachment. They came out to the National Assembly on the night of the impeachment itself. So there was this sort of, broad popular backstop of democracy. That part's good. But of course, the country is wildly polarized. And this is ultimately a fundamental poison to the democracy here, just as it is in any country that has this type of polarization. So, the thing that I would encourage your average South Korean citizen to do is, first of all, to put politics in perspective. It doesn't have to be life and death. It doesn't have to be something that splits you from friends and family and coworkers. Also, stop being online so much. Get away from these YouTube conspiracy channels and these other forms of conspiracy theory mongering, which I think has infected the way that people think about politics here, just as it has in a lot of other places. And to some degree, just put politics in context and be more careful about the information that one consumes. The parties obviously have a responsibility to not inflame this polarization as well.
Well, it's more painful and heartbreaking because this is not the first time we're going through this, whole chaos. But to overcome this time of confusion and conflict, the politicians should lead by example, experts say. Professor Richie, tell us, how can they do so?
So in the first place, I think the PPP need to humbly accept the Constitutional Court judgment. They need to humbly accept the upcoming criminal trial for insurrection that Yoon will go through, as will other people who were a part of this martial law declaration. And the PPP need to do a creditable, responsible job of choosing their next candidate, someone who, of course, reflects their values, but one who also reflects, a desire to unify politically, and someone who obviously has a platform that is forward-looking and democratic. On the side of the Democratic Party, the same thing is true, but perhaps in reverse. They need to magnanimously accept the Constitutional Court result. They need to not politicize the trials that are going forward on insurrection against the president and other members of the martial law group. And they need to themselves be very self-aware of who it is that they choose as their upcoming candidate, and put forth a message that unifies and doesn't overreach on their mandate. They don't have a mandate to do whatever they want, and they don't have a mandate to come in and crush the conservatives either.
Well, we are out of a sitting president here in South Korea. That means Prime Minister and acting President Han Duck-soo has a lot on his shoulders. Now, how can he navigate through this hard time? I mean, how can the government make sure there's no gap in keeping, let's say, foreign relations up and running?
That's going to be quite a challenge. To some degree, the role that Han Duck-soo plays should be that of a unifier domestically. You cannot have a functional, effective foreign policy or economic policy, with in terms of external relations, unless you have political unity at home. So one of his jobs is going to be to try to unify, and that means he needs to be responsible towards the DP and probably end up, passing some things that are coming out of the, legislature that he might not want to pass. He needs, of course, also to be responsible vis-a-vis the PPP. So, his job, I think, is to unify and more or less to keep the country on a solid track and a responsible track towards the upcoming election. And, of course, he's going to have to manage the day-to-day affairs. That probably means in terms of, tariffs and the relationship with the United States, just trying to manage things as basically as they can. And probably the message to some degree, to Washington should be, and I think Washington will expect this, of course, we're not ready yet to discuss a lot of the things in the alliance, a lot of the things involving economics. Give us the 2 months in order to get this election through, and then we'll be able to come to the table and talk to you. It's a shame, but that's the way it is.
Right, we do have the 60 days to, get settled down and move forward on the economic and foreign policy front. Now, tensions are higher than ever. It's inevitable to spot it if you're here in the country. How can possible frictions and violence be minimized so that we can have a smooth presidential election? I mean, what is essential for a peaceful and harmonious election this summer?
Well, the absolutely most important thing would be for now removed President Yoon to make a humble statement that he accepts that what he did was wrong, and that he apologizes to the people, and that he does not want his supporters to inflame politically the polarization that's already here, much less obviously engage in any type of political violence, whether that be in the immediate aftermath of this Constitutional Court decision or during the election period going forward. And as I said, the PPP has a responsibility, beyond Yoon himself, to accept this judgment, which so far, at least, it seems like they have done in the discourse that we've seen so far. And then as I said, the side of the DP, they need to accept this with magnanimity and realize that they have also played a role in this, and that they have problems of corruption on their side. They have problems of mandate overreach on their side. They have their own YouTube conspiracy blind spots. And so, they also need to act responsibly. I don't anticipate that this is going to happen on either side. Unfortunately, the politicians that we have in the world today aren't the best people that we have. But within the parameters of what is possible, the DP needs to put forth the best and most responsible candidate that they can, someone who's going to be an honest broker and not overreach his or her mandate coming out of this impeachment debacle for South Korea's democracy.
Well, politicians in any country should live up to the expectations of the people in the countries. Now, plus resilience and civil demeanor are vital for the people of South Korea. Now, Professor Ricci, thank you so much for connecting with us this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
주문, 피청구인 대통령 윤석열을 파면한다.
We continue our discussion on the Constitutional Court's impeachment ruling on former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Let's pick up where we left off with Professor Song Se-ryun and also legal expert Kim Ji-soo. So, Ji-soo, I'd like to start with you. Let's go over the 5 points that the Constitutional Court justices stressed that it was unconstitutional for President Yoon to declare a martial law declaration.
Yes, definitely. The Constitutional Court sets a very strict rule regarding the democracy, and they have overruled this Yoon's side's declaring that it was just a mere high-level political act. It was definitely an unconstitutional one, which could harm the democracy itself. So that is why they have a unanimous vote to 8-0, I guess.
And there was a no gap in difference on justices when it came to disrupting activities at the National Assembly, right?
Yes, same thing. They looked at the declaration that says, all political activities should be stopped, and there were enough evidence to say that they were trying to round up the politicians, thereby paralyzing the National Assembly, that was the only institution that functioned as a check and balance in the scheme of the Constitution. So, to that, I don't think they had a big question about this.
Right. Yoon's call to paralyze the parliament was not justified whatsoever. Now, in line with that, the justices also mentioned how former President Yoon, used military personnel, to create this standoff against the South Korean people. Tell us more about that.
Right. That was very shocking because when you have political issues, and to try to solve it with the deployment of the military, even if it says, martial law permits it, it creates such a disruption. And the justices were right in saying that it is essentially a political dispute, and it has to be resolved within the political and the democratic schemes and the institutions. And stepping outside of that boundary, the President Yoon made it easier for the justices to say that this is a grave violation of the Constitution by heading the military personnel, which we haven't seen for decades.
Right.
With the lawmakers and citizens. That was shocking enough.
Right. In a nutshell, declaring a martial law was not the best way to, settle down democracy and fully practice that idea.
Well, it was not the best way, but it's actually the worst way of going about resolving or addressing any kind of policy or the disputes in a political sense.
Well, Chisu, last but not least, in terms of the five focal points, the unconstitutionality of the search and seizure of the Election Commission, what did the court have to say?
Well, the court definitely said there were other measures that can be lawfully justifiable. And also they mentioned about the manual script that they had inside the commissionery. So definitely there was a very little room for fraud in the election in itself. And they have seen that Yoon's side of statement was not justifiable, even in the worst case ever.
Well, it is the Constitutional Court of Justice that ruled to dismiss a president of a country. Now, this may not be so familiar with our viewers around the world, with the whole Constitutional Court making the final call for a leader. Now, where does the sole authority and power come from for the court, Constitutional Court, Professor Song?
Well, the Constitutional Court was established in 1987, the last time we amended the Constitution. And that came about, modeled after Germany, actually, to put a very responsible judiciary as a final sayer. As you notice, our impeachment system is different from the United States, where the lower house makes a resolution and the Senate makes a decision. So to us, the safety guard was the establishing this highest court in the Constitution itself. I think that dismissing two presidents in our recent memories, it's a role they play which would go down as a kind of our democratic experience, but at the same time, the fact that we have two presidents dismissed, it is an indication that something has to be fixed.
Unfortunate.
So I think that there would be, if the sane minds will prevail, there would be reform measures not only in the presidency, but also the function of how we resolve this kind of the differences and disputes. And I think that it would also include the Constitutional Court under what circumstances they brought in and what kind of standards they have to go through. So I think there are a lot of homeworks that we are looking at. And maybe if you look at it, the silver lining, the 1987 amendment of the Constitution came just after the military rule for the decades. So this is a time where all those experiments that we had, presidency and the National Assembly, and those things will become a kind of learning curve and make something of a K-politics or something like that. And maybe it requires a generation change. I mean, those people who are over 60s, I'm sorry, but they're maybe too old and their experiences are too kind of has-beens.
It could take some time.
Right, it could take some time, but
it may be
this year, this year, the people with 40 years old became a person who can be even elected as the president.
Who knows?
Who knows? But if not 40s, maybe early 50s, late 40s. We look at France and other experiences of the countries around the world. Maybe this is a time where we seriously think about the change of guards and change of generation who grew up in the advanced and the very affluent Korea, rather than resorting our memories to a war or all those, you know, the disruptions of the society that we overcame. So I think we can make this and turn it around as an opportunity to make it better.
Right, we have come a long way.
We did.
Right, Jisoo. Now, this is the impeachment ruling that we're talking about. This is a single trial, which means there's no going back. Why is impeachment ruling a single trial when criminal rulings are not?
Well, as Professor Song mentioned, our Constitutional Court was established in the reflection of past authoritarian regimes. So because it delivers decisions independently of the three branches of government, the Constitutional Court's rulings are treated as a final expression of state authority. So constitutional court's ruling cannot be restricted or overturned by any other institutions. And it's a way for us to guarantee a law-abided country.
Well, the impeachment ruling has wrapped up. It's over now, but President Yoon still has one more task pending. That's the criminal trial for him, right, Professor Song?
Yes. Even if he remained as a president, his immunity does not extend to insurrection charges. So he would have been facing court proceedings. But outside of the presidency, his protection is so much less at this point.
Right, as a civilian.
Right. It would have been difficult to go through the criminal proceedings with the sitting presidents, but now there's no hurdle. But I think that this, I don't think people will care too much about what happens in the criminal trial. He's out of the presidency. And we have a more immediate and more challenging task of getting the president anew. And that president will be coming in without the transition period, which we experienced not even a decade ago. And let's see how that turned out. So I think that the challenge is too much to talk about or care about the president who was impeached and going through his own now, a personal trial.
Well, it may be not on the top of our minds, South Korean people, but it is a huge task for former President Yoon. Jisoo, briefly walk us through the criminal trial proceedings for Yoon.
Well, now that the immunity benefit has been removed, there are several allegations he has been facing, but delayed it because due to this process. However, there are several, I'm going to elaborate several allegations of the criminal trial. And first, there could be the abuse of power charges, which were investigated alongside the insurrection cases. And this is expected to be addressed as the first allegations in the following steps. So these charges relate to irregular cabinet meetings and effort to take control of the National Assembly, which has been overgone with the Constitutional Court's ruling again. And secondly, there's this called obstructing the execution of an arrest warrant. So police allege that in January, the President's Security Service blocked the warrant's execution under his direction. So definitely this could be the case of the problematic. And also there is a part of alleged interference by Yoon and his wife in party nominations involving Mr. Myung Tae-gyun. So this has been blocked, but with this removal right now, these kinds of allegations can be floated above the surface, and also a new arrest warrant may be sought for crimes beyond these insurrection cases. And the first hearing in the insurrection trial is scheduled for April 14th, and unlike the impeachment process or betrayal hearings, you must appear in person. And to move swiftly, 4 hearings have already been scheduled, 1 each week starting April 14th.
All right, that is a dead for former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Now, Professor Song, last but not least, before I let you go, next in line is a new presidential election. We are officially, I have to say, in this election mode. And we're talking about June 3rd to be the big day. Is that so? Right. It is a big day, and it is not long enough for each parties to get prepared, especially for PP. They sided with the president. They're in the losing side, and they don't have a credible or the formidable the candidate that they can name at this point. So it is definitely a opposition party's chance to ascend to the power again. I think that this whole experience was contentious because the Korean politics for some time has become wait a while until the other party makes mistakes. Right? So it's not a fortunate situation. But I think that the PP party should apply themselves to reform, to suggest or have a vision of what conservative movements means for Korea in 21st centuries and now. They haven't done so. They haven't done it convincingly. So that, if they had more time, probably become a good platform
for the June 3rd election, but I don't know if they have enough time to do that, to pick the person and have the messages ready. I think Mr. Lee Jae-myung, because of his recent not guilty charges, verdicts on the appellate courts, maybe he has easier time convincing people that he should be the next president, but there are a lot of people resisting it. So the political dramas go on up until June 3rd.
Well, that is another topic that we have to spend hours on with you, Professor Song and Jisoo. South Korea may be missing a president for now, but the ruling has also left us with this big national project, a new president election, right?
Right. I think that my faith is on the civil servants and the technocrats in the government and Mr. Han Dok-soo at this point to do a bang-up job, a good job in a transition government.
All right, Professor Song, thank you as always for your insights and your time. And also, Jisoo, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
All right, that is all we have for this afternoon on this ruling day. But we will continue our coverage on the impeachment ruling throughout the day. Our next newscast at 5 p.m. Korea time. This has been Kim Da-mi. Thank you so much for watching.